Welcome to today's episode of MetroStar's Civvies Podcast. Today, we have Lee Ring joining us virtually to tell us a little bit more about his transition out of the Air Force to becoming a small business owner and creating CrossFit Lobo in San Antonio, Texas. This is a great episode for any veterans out there that are thinking about starting their own business and have no idea where to start in that process. Join us in the comments on today's episode. Tell us what you think and what you want to know more about. Welcome to Civvies, where we bridge military experience and civilian triumph. I'm Stephanie Holman, this season's new host and a former Army Medical Service Corps reservist turned technical recruiter. Over the years, I've tackled a variety of terrains from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. Join me as we gather stories and explore the intersection of military expertise and civilian opportunities, providing valuable insights for a seamless journey beyond the uniform. Welcome to Civvies, a podcast by MetroStar. Welcome to another episode of MetroStar's Civvies. Today, we've got Lee Ring, an Air Force veteran and current owner of CrossFit Lobo, located in San Antonio, Texas, joining us virtually in the studio. This one's special for me. This is my first time as a host having a veteran business owner join us. So definitely want to dive in more into Lee's story, transitioning from active duty as an airborne cryptologic linguist, hope I got that right, with over 500 flight hours as a Special Operations Forces Special Intelligence Operator. And I couldn't think of a better veteran to bring on to hear from, especially about starting a business from the ground up and operating it during one of the most challenging times that we've lived through, the pandemic. So Lee, man, welcome. Thanks for joining us on Civvies.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right in here. Take me on your journey, starting with the Air Force. For those in the audience that may have, never served, what in the world is an airborne cryptologic linguist? What does that mean? What did you do?
Sure. I'll preface everything by saying I never did my job. Ever. I was trained really well for 2.5, 3 years. So basically, I had two paths that I was going to go into, either pararescue, which is the special operations side of the Air Force, or one of the avenues, or become a linguist. And I took a test called the D-Lab, which is a fancy made-up language test, and apparently I did okay. I don't know how I did that, but I did it. And then they put me into the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and I learned Korean for 18 months straight. Wow. I was probably the dumbest kid there in my early 20s. I had no idea what I was doing. Ended up passing, and then ended up at Offutt Air Force Base to do my airborne training after that. Survival school, crypto school, and then you end up with a bunch of clearances. I ended up raising my hand for a deployment I had no idea about. I just knew that there weren't many Koreans in Iraq. And then I ended up in the U.S. Special Operations Command, doing a bunch of interesting things and not doing anything related aside from being in planes. So
Gotcha.
It was an interesting ride.
Yeah, I also appreciate that you've worked in the cleared community. That's part of your story as well. And you're no longer supporting the cleared community. Now you're a business owner. So want to talk about that transition as well. When you separated from the Air Force, I think it was like October 2009, yep. Where were you in the world? Were you still at Offutt? Where were you overseas?
Sure. So I came back from Iraq and I had 3 weeks to separate. So I got through TAPS and through everything else, transition program. So I didn't really have a whole lot of time to make decisions. I was slated to get married in October. So it was right that same month. And then my now ex-wife was an Office of Special Investigations federal agent in the military, and she was stationed at Ramstein in Germany. And so I basically went from Iraq to the States, got married in Hawaii, came back to DC, and then flew to Germany and ended up in Germany.
And that all happened in well, it sounds like very rapidly, but what was the actual time frame? Are we talking a couple months, a year?
It was about a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of change. So you get to Germany, you separate from the Air Force, and then kind of what happens?
So then it was very strange because I was always told with my clearances and everything else that I would go. And this goes into how I know you. I go, all right, well, I'm going to find a contracting job or some GS job, government service job, right away. No, that's not how that works. Unless you are plugged into that community right away, which I was not. It was a very quick transition, and I didn't have a whole lot of time stateside to get my affairs in order. So I found out very quickly that because I was overseas, I wasn't allowed to get unemployment.
Yep.
Even though that's supposed to happen post-military service. And then I ended up just applying to as many jobs on the intel side and security side. I have a master's degree in security management. Nothing, because I learned very quickly that everybody knows each other in Germany and they never leave.
Right.
And I waited. So what I ended up doing and how I met you, I ended up substitute teaching at Ramstein High School for, I think it was 6 or 9 months before I found an actual job.
Yeah. For those that don't know, so back then I was completing my master's of education and trying to figure it out, doing my internship over there. And that's kind of how, we met. And I think it's so unique that you separated overseas. I have to remind our audience and folks listening, again, this is back in 2009. So the resources, the networking that we see today didn't exist back then. Just for reference, LinkedIn launched in 2003. So it was still like in its infancy stages in 2009. Facebook launched in 2004. So I would guess that you weren't actively on, those social networks. It's not like it is today where you can just quickly kind of tap into a virtual military network for guidance. So what kind of resources did you find overseas? You just mentioned, TAPS. So you went through TAPS. TAPS is still around. Most military, I think it's mandatory. You got to go through that. But how did you even know where to apply for government contracting companies that were overseas?
I didn't. I mean, that was a really, really easy answer. I had no idea what I was doing. It was mostly, I had a resume that I had, scratched together, and the idea was maybe go reserves at that point after a few months of just not knowing, sitting around being depressed and going, my whole goal honestly was to do the exact same thing I was doing overseas in Iraq. Mm-hmm. That all, kind of started, those contracts started to fade a little bit.
Okay.
And I kind of was up the creek without a paddle. And then finally, I can't remember exactly what happened, but somebody told somebody, and then they gave me an interview, and they had a spot open at the 603rd AOC, the Air and Space Operations Command, as a security guy. And I go, yes, I'm fine, whatever. And I just took whatever I could right away. First opportunity. They just wanted to give me a shot, and it was supposed to be very temporary. They ended up liking me after that contract ended because it was a 6-month contract. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up in information operations, which is non-kinetic, the precursor to a lot of the Space Force stuff that's happening right now, and cyber and everything else. And in an intelligence cell, and stood that up, and that was really fun. And then I kind of bounced around to a couple other jobs after those contracts ended. Mm-hmm. And it just, you go where the wind takes you, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to back up as well and go back to the substitute teaching, which I think is really cool that you're trying to figure out where to go next in your military transition. And you don't want to sit around, right? You want to do something and get back into the community. And so you fall into subbing. Was that hard for you to do mentally? Was it challenging? Was the idea challenging to think of okay, I'm applying for a substitute teaching position after just serving in the military?
So coming from so yes and no. teaching, I had some experience. I taught for 1 year. I played baseball through college. I taught for 1 year in a little town outside of Vegas. I taught at middle school, and then I subbed around before I got my own classroom, and then I joined the military right after that. So I had experience from a teaching standpoint. So that wasn't super difficult. The transition from 12-hour days and high ops tempo in that special operations community was very odd. But then again, they're kids, and kids are crazy. And it's kind of fun because there's a whole bunch of different things that you got to deal with all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I will say this about DoD kids. Anybody you guys listening that grew up overseas and did Dodge school, you're not smarter than anybody else, but you're way more street smart than anybody else because you've had to deal with overseas stuff. And that was really fun because I got to actually have conversations with the kids. I really enjoyed my time with those kids. It was a totally different experience. And that was really, really a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's a interesting and fun time to look back on for me. I remember, interfacing with you in the office, and I didn't know. I knew you had separated from service, but didn't know exactly specifically what you had done or that you've, been deployed or things like that. Those kids loved you, man. I hope one of them finds it, one of the Ramstein High School students finds this video because they definitely loved you and appreciated your energy that you brought into that environment. So you find yourself at PAE. You stay there. It sounds like about almost 2 years before you eventually transfer back stateside. Tell me what happened when you got back stateside. Did you stay kind of within this intelligence community? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so that was the worst time. So I came back I'd been overseas for a good, 4 years at that point, Iraq plus Germany. And I was just following my wife, who was still active duty at the time. I was unemployed for, 9 months, I think. Mm-hmm. Just couldn't find a thing. And you coming back to San Antonio, which is Military City, USA.
Right. That's surprising to hear.
Absolutely. When you think of where you could find a job outside of the Beltway, it would be San Antonio. And I just found that around that time period, even when I did get a job, finally at the Joint Information Operations Warfare Center, it was very short contracts, very much a bunch of lieutenant colonels who had known each other for 40 years, who have done the same thing in the same desk and the same butts and seats forever and ever and ever. And 30-year-old me, nothing. It was fighting for a spot at all times, trying, scratching and clawing and staying within your scope of work, which I can't stand. And playing that game for 5 minutes of actual work and getting a paycheck, it just didn't work out for me. And then that all ended. And then I was unemployed again after that. And then I got into a company called EOG Resources, which is a massive oil and gas company. Mm-hmm. And they took a shot on me just because they were hiring people it was like a quasi logistics job for half field, half in office. And that's where I learned how to be awake for 24 hours a day, more so than the military. And then just earn my way there because they were just hiring veterans and they would train them up, which I thought was great. And I said, yeah, I'll do that.
You're incredible from being in the military, fast forward, you're working for EOG Resources as a materials specialist, right? You do that for 4 years and then boom, you co-found a CrossFit gym. How did you do that? Where did this, I've just got so many questions right now about that transition with the gym. Did you always know that you wanted to start your own business? Was this something that was years and years and years in the making? Right. Where did it start?
Yeah, no. The answer is absolutely not.
Okay.
No. So I had started doing CrossFit in 2009, my very first, it's kind of apt, but we're right around Memorial Day. And my very first CrossFit workout was in the middle of Iraq, and it was Murph, which if people don't know, it's terrible. But everybody does it. It's a mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and another mile run. And that was my indoctrination into figuring out that I wasn't in very good shape, apparently. And so then that kind of stuck. I started doing CrossFit through a buddy of mine who ended up opening CrossFit Lackland here in San Antonio.
Okay.
I was here stationed in Germany with him. And then I started coaching when I got to San Antonio. And that was my first kind of like quasi job because somebody wanted to give me an opportunity because I've been doing it for a minute. And so I started coaching, and a couple of years into coaching, some people came up to me and said, "We will back you if you want to run our gym." And I said, I for lack of a better way of saying it, I was just trying to get my shit together and figure out what else I want to do with my life. And I go, no, I don't want to be a business owner. All these gym owners are burnt out. I don't want to deal with people more. Like, this is not good. You've met me. Come on, man. And
this is, again, such a great example of like perception is not reality, because little Stephanie over here, scoping you out on LinkedIn, I'm thinking, man, this guy had a business plan. This was 10 years in the making. He knew he was going after a CrossFit gym. And then you hear the reality of it. You're approached and you're like, no, this is not for me. So keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. Super reluctant business owner / entrepreneur, completely reluctant. I mean, there was nothing appealing about it at all. I wanted something stable, just like the military. I wanted a paycheck coming in. I just wanted somebody to give me purpose, and by golly, I was going to get myself purpose no matter what it was. And so anyhow, I ended up, I will correct you a little bit. I didn't start the gym. I bought it from a military guy who I knew. He was about 2 years in, give or take, and that was about 8 years ago. So I bought the gym with two other people. The third, and that was 2016. Mm-hmm. The third person was out by, it was 2 months in. 2 months in, it was 2 months for him.
That's quick.
And so then it was two of us, and now the gym is mine, all by myself. And that was 8 years ago, and you mentioned it. I mean, we got through COVID when so many other gyms and businesses in general just got absolutely screwed.
So I gotta ask, can we talk about money for a minute? I'm not going to ask you how much or anything, but you buy the gym. You've got some co-owners. Did you take like a small business loan to make this happen? Like, what does the funding side of this look like for people that are listening and thinking, hey, I want to start my own business?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. And there's a ton of business opportunities out there. I've worked on the mentorship side of business ownership, gym ownership, plenty of different times. It depends on how much you want to spend, how much you have up front. I'm very debt averse. This one in particular wasn't making money. This gym was not making money, and it was next to nothing to inherit and try to build from a very small gym membership with a very large kind of capital investment as far as what the rent is concerned and the utilities and everything else, because it's a bigger gym. Mm-hmm. I have about 8,000, 9,000 square feet of usable space plus another 10,000 outside. And at the time, San Antonio was pretty cheap. It's getting more expensive now.
Right.
Which is also driving people out of different areas. But it was next to nothing. And it was because there was almost no investment. It was almost harder because I was like, well, it's almost free. It's kind of a no-brainer, I guess. I guess I'll do this. I guess. Why not?
Yeah.
Let's try it and see if it, and see what happens. And, one of the things that I've learned over the years from business ownership is you learn the most from people that do it wrong, and not many do it right. And it's really, really good to learn what not to do. But then again, you don't know then if you're doing anything correctly. You can look at because there's been plenty of months. I mean, even through COVID, you lose money because you don't know what's going to happen in this election cycle. You don't know how many people you're going to get in because marketing is marketing, and everybody's on their own journey. No matter how many times I post an idiotic video, it's not going to necessarily drive more people in. It's just not, especially like the mantra at the gym is do hard shit so you can do hard shit. I don't know that many people nowadays that really want to do hard things just voluntarily all the time. And that makes it tough. if I can give anybody advice, find the next toilet paper and sell that because everybody wants it and everybody needs it.
Right.
Make it easy.
Right. And maybe there isn't a who gave you permission to do the dang thing? Like, I get it. These folks approached you, right? And said, hey, we think you'd be good at this. Fast forward, you find yourself in this situation to be a co-owner, taking over this gym. Did you have any self-doubt? What kind of like internal conversations were you having with yourself? Was there someone that's came to you and said, Lee, like, this is it. You got to do this. You got to lean into it. Or did you come to that, conclusion yourself with saying, okay, I'm going all in on this thing? So, oh God, that's a good question and very layered. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The answer is nobody ever gave me anything aside from me just saying yes to like some opportunities. Mm-hmm. And then from like having really old school coaches with very negative attitudes through college, it's more shut up and color. You said yes, you're not going to quit. Just do it. And do it as best as you possibly can until somebody tells you to stop. And that's kind of the mentality that I've always had from an opportunity standpoint. Right. If there's an opportunity and you say yes, which I usually end up saying yes to really stupid things like climbing Mount Rainier, which is really dumb, or other things like doing Murph 16 years in a row now. I know I signed up for this thing. I'm going to be the face of it. I better do it. So, one thing about leadership in general that I've learned is if you don't lead by example, nobody's going to follow at all at all. And the same with business, same with, in a relationship, it's if you don't lead by example, you're screwed. And so if you say yes to something, don't quit just because it's a little hard. I'm sorry. No kidding. Everything's hard. Everything sucks. But how do you deal with it? How do you wake up every morning and are you going to give it, your all, whatever you have in that, for that capacity that day? There you go. I mean, that's it. Right. And I think what we are seeing now so often with Gen Z, because I deal with them a lot at the gym and younger millennials, is that it's so easy to quit now. And there's some, though, this very small percentage that come to my gym. Every single kid that came into my gym and actually wanted to do hard things is now an military officer. And that's like 8 out of 8. Interesting. Then they were not military kids. It's like you're military families running your own like social experiment at the CrossFit gym.
I'm getting my own militia together is what I'm doing.
What is going on here?
So that's just it's been a very interesting, the whole thing of owning a gym, and the reason why I've kept it up even through COVID and, there's plenty of months where I lose money. There's plenty of months where I make some money. But I think it's important enough to keep going. And that's why I keep trying, because I believe in what it does and what the community does and the reverberations from people will still reach out to me from 7 years ago who will go, I miss this so much and I can't find something the same. Yeah. And that just
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about, why folks join CrossFit and that community that you've built. I think it's pretty unique, but I want to mention the stats, right? Before we get to that, you've been in business almost 8 years. And I wanted to pull this up because I just think you're, super successful with this. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 50% of businesses fail at the 5-year mark, right? You're over that. Mm-hmm. So you figured out the secret sauce to your business to keep folks coming. And so that's where I kind of wanted to go with this, with the community. Who joins CrossFit and what are they there for? Is it purely physical? Is it mental? Is it a combination of both? Tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah. It's a good question because everybody's different, but everybody has similar threads in their motivation. Let's see. The biggest, it's all meant, you have to be ready mentally to do it. You don't have to be ready physically. Okay. The physical stuff happens much later on when you start to unlock the confidence that ends up being bred into whatever it is that you want to do outside the gym. Because what we do in the gym has nothing to do with what CrossFit actually does. It makes you, like I always tell people, when you do hard things every single day for a very long time, it unlocks just whatever it is that you want to do outside. And where do I see most injuries? This is something, a point of contention for most people who are intimidated by CrossFit. And first and foremost, it would be a really bad business model if any CrossFit gym owner got people hurt.
Right.
Okay. So what's the number one thing that people go, it gets you hurt? And I go, look at my reviews and how long have I been in business? I'm pretty sure, aside from me just being called a prick all the time, that people would have hospital bills.
And you gotta explain the prick thing, because that's part of it's part of like your marketing, and it's it's a really endearing thing that you've created. Tell us, just to fill the audience in on that. I didn't create it.
That was the funny part is so the main guy behind CrossFit, or one of the main guys, his name is Dave Castro, and back, I can't remember, it was late 2000s, maybe early 2010s, where some of the main CrossFit, everybody hates this guy. He's loved and hated, revered, an ex-Navy SEAL. And they said Dave Castro is a prick on t-shirts at the CrossFit Games. And then a few years go by and I own the gym, and a couple of my athletes make those shirts that say Lee Ring is a prick.
Right.
And that ends up being my Instagram handle, and now my kind of persona.
It's catchy.
which is I'm flipped off constantly at the gym. I do all the programming, and that's kind of where it is. Back
to the injuries, when you were talking about, folks have this perception that people are getting injured in the gym. 100% guilty. When I first, saw that you were doing the gym thing, and I was scoping out the social media videos that you've got out there, I was thinking, if someone asked me to come in there and jump on this box that's 2 feet, off the floor, like I'm going backwards, I'm going to break my arm. It's not going to be a good scene. But clearly no one's fallen off a box and gotten gravely injured in your gym.
Not gravely, maimed a little.
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody that's been doing CrossFit for a little bit has shin scars but they live. It's fine.
Nice. So, we talked about like the financing piece. I definitely want to dive into more questions that maybe some veterans out there who, again, are looking at starting a business might have, right? Talk to me about like rebranding this business, right? You said you guys purchased it. It was not in a very good state. It wasn't, pretty successful at that time. And you had to build the branding and the marketing of that. How did you go about attracting new clients? Like, where do you start? Are you joining the Chamber of Commerce and getting connected within the community? What did that look like?
So for me, being brand new, it was don't do anything, don't make any major changes in 90 days, if not 6 months. That whole period is just learning what this business is, where it is that there might be holes, because they might be glaring holes at front at first, and maybe a weakness, but it could end up being a strength based on what you learn. So if anybody buys a business, I would just, A, you got to be passionate about it. B, you got to learn absolutely everything before you start to change any branding, because then you end, especially with an existing business, if you're doing it from scratch, it's a whole different ballgame, which I have done. I've done that as well. I opened a second gym and did that from scratch. So that was a whole different thing. But and so many people are buying a business, and a big shout out to a girl named Cody Sanchez, who, if anybody wants to learn how to buy a business and how, like, SBA funding and all that stuff, she's amazing. I think she's out of Austin, but cool. Her husband was an ex-Navy SEAL. Cody Sanchez is awesome. And she's had, tons and tons of resources there. But the biggest thing for me is wait, stay consistent, be a consistent force in your business, be seen, not heard. Don't tell anybody anything.
This is good stuff you're dropping.
You say it's kind of like parenting. It's less tell, more show.
Right.
So if you can stay consistent, it's like being in the gym and seeing progress. If you can just stay consistent for a good amount of time, things kind of fall into place, because it's a lot more perception management than you think, especially if you're a service-based industry. Now, products are a little bit different. But you still have a solid customer base up front if you're buying your own business. And if you just rebrand right away, you could alienate a whole bunch of people. And so just staying the course, learning as much as you possibly can. Maybe you don't need to change anything. Maybe it's as successful as it's going to be. And that's okay. but going with the flow. I think one of the best thing that ever happened to me was going through, because we were up till March of 2020. That last year was absolutely spectacular for CrossFit, for people wanting to do hard things.
Right.
Confidence was an all-time high. People were ready to do things that maybe they were a little more uncomfortable. And then COVID hit. And then the reverberations are still being seen today.
Absolutely.
For those of us who survived and those of us who didn't, what a great opportunity to learn and have to adjust on the fly. So terrible in so many instances because so many people lost businesses, but it also did a really, really good job of getting maybe people that shouldn't have been in business because it was too easy out. It was a forced flushing. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that there's opportunity now, even more so than there was before,
right,
for entrepreneurs and people who want to take risks.
I'm curious what your views are, and let me know if this one's a bit too much. Suicide rates. I want to talk to you about that. Obviously, we've got a big problem, right? We've got the veterans that are unfortunately their lives are ending due to suicide. I think 22 per day, but probably more at this point. And I think it's really important for these kind of conversations to keep happening at every level. How important is physical fitness for some of our veterans that are transitioning to the civilian side? Like, what are your views on that? Do you think that folks really need to lean in on their physical fitness as a starting point when they're transitioning and going through these big kind of life moves?
Great question.
It's a lot.
What I'll say about that is physical fitness is on the list. It's on the list. I'll say this. If you weren't physically fit in the military, because there's plenty of us that weren't,
right,
maybe that's not the right avenue for you to tackle right when you get out. I think it's very important. Believe me, I think physical fitness is not like one of the number one things, one or two on top of sleep and stress. Finding a community of like-minded people is number one.
Okay.
When you're getting out, and that could be in a CrossFit gym. There's a bunch of us that like to do hard things, and that's part of the military. I think physical fitness is right up there if you're ready to do that. And that could just be moving, getting sunlight, doing whatever. It doesn't have to be CrossFit by any means.
Right.
On top of that, if you can find a place that you feel at home to be yourself, if it coincides with physical fitness, even better. And I think CrossFit gyms are absolutely, even Orange Theory and some of these other places that are kind of more group fitness are absolutely quintessential and gosh, to mental health. Right. Just being able to weather some of the storms because some of these people speak like you and they understand, I was stationed there too. And this and that. And you have something, especially when you're out there lost and maybe you're not in the government anymore, because that's where most government people come from, is it come from a lot of military folks. But yeah, no, I think being active and finding a community to be active in, whether it's a running club or biking or whatever it is absolutely paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been open, about this. I've jumped in and out of therapy here and there. Life is hard. Life is unpredictable. Things happen, right? And when they do, it's great to go talk to a professional and throw that stuff around with someone that you can trust and you might not ever have to see again too. So I always want to put that out there. But one of the reoccurring advice that I've gotten in different chapters of my life is exactly what you just hit on. You have to move. You have to get physical in some kind of way. Like you said, go get some sunlight, take a walk, right? And that's something I tell my kids even, is like, okay, got a big problem here, right? We're not going to solve it all in the next minute or 5 minutes, but let's take a walk. Generally, do just a quick 5-10 minutes. Maybe you feel like a little less, heightened about whatever situation you're facing. Talk to me more about like the sense of community that people find within CrossFit. I know you've got a lot of, veterans that are part of your community, but I think for someone that hasn't been in CrossFit before, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this it's not my lane. But for someone like me that's never done CrossFit, I think of all of my fears about starting CrossFit, and all of those fears kind of stack up and act as blockers to just get in the door. Right. Sure. So I think a lot of folks out there, they might have an idea of like, okay, I'm going to walk in, people are going to look at me, noodle arms over here, and judge you or make fun of you. What is it? Tell me about the community that you've built there, and like, what is the reality of day one at Lobo CrossFit Gym?
Sure. So I've had 2 of those in the last 2 days. So I've had, so I have a very recent experience with very intimidated young ladies who came in and were ready to go. Both were very intimidated. One threw up before the warm up even started pretty much.
Oh no.
But it happens. So,
okay.
So let's talk about the realities of walking in. So the way that I do things is I'll preface everything. I run things differently than most. I am the only owner that I know of, and maybe there's a bunch out there, but I'm the only one that I know of that hops on a phone call with everybody that's a prospective candidate to come to the gym before bringing them in. I'll talk to them for 5 minutes. I'll talk to them for an hour. It just depends on their journey and where they're at. That usually calms them down enough to take the next step, where I'm there for the first free trial. I don't do any onboarding. I don't do any of that stuff. I need to show you the product and show you that you can do this.
Right.
But I'm going to be there. I'm not the coach, but I'm going to be there making sure that you're as comfortable and confident as you possibly can be, doing hard things. CrossFit is infinitely scalable. And I will preface, and I'll circle back. If you walk into a gym and you feel intimidated because other people are looking at you like that, leave. Walk away, find another gym.
Okay.
Walk away and find another gym. Find a place where people smile. Find a place that people look like you. My gym is very normal people who have their shit together in the rest of their life and come there for church. They come there for the best hour of their day because they know that they can shut their brains off, get coached. They don't have to think about a workout. They just do it. And at the end, we high five everybody. And then we go on our merry way and go, all right, that sucked. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
It's really what it is. And people get addicted to that thing. And it's a habit of really feeling good about yourself when you accomplish something, even if you had a really shitty day. The number one thing that gets in people's ways is ego. And people most of the time think of ego and CrossFit as the pendulum swings this other way I can't remember exactly what you said, but it's like rhinoceros men who eat glass or something along those lines. And I thought that was awesome. And the answer is that's what you may see on TV, but the reality of what CrossFit actually is in real life is just a bunch of noodle arm, non-rhino, non-glass eating people.
I'm reminded again for the veterans that are listening who are coming up on a transition out of service or post service and trying to figure it out, just how incredibly important connection, network, and community are to having a successful outcome. And maybe it's not a CrossFit gym, maybe it's a military veteran group or something, but find your people is what I just keep kind of hearing you say. Give me some advice for aspiring veteran entrepreneurs. What's some kind of practical advice that you would give other veterans who are considering starting their own business?
Get ready to feel alone.
Oh, God. Hold on. Let me take the dagger out of my chest. Okay. That was that. Okay.
Get ready to understand what real leadership needs to be. And understand that you're not going to know, it's not going to be handed to you, no matter what checklist or book that you read or what business coach says. You and you alone are the one that's driving the ship. Military folks, even on the officer side, always answer to somebody. Doesn't matter who it is. You don't. And the worst thing that I can tell, or the best advice I can give is never complain down. We learned that in the military.
Absolutely.
That's where a lot of us have a problem. And there's nobody really to complain to. Mm-hmm. So keep your negativity to yourself. If you're having a rough day, nobody else gets to have a rough day.
Right.
If you're having a great day, it's because of them. That's it. I mean, your employees are your eyes and ears, and you hired them for a reason. Delegate your ass off Don't try to do everything. But at the end of the day, you are by yourself, and that is a very lonely road, and it's something you're going to have to deal with. And if you come out of the military and you haven't dealt with your own shit, and you're not in therapy, and maybe you've seen some stuff like we all have, guess what? You better get into that and get your house in order before you start feeling even lonelier, because those coping mechanisms will get even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing, I've learned from grief, trauma, and all that stuff, it just waits for you. So you can do whatever you want to do to suppress it, push it down, ignore it, and it's like, all right, we done? Because I'm still waiting for you to come cry. Yeah, you got to address it. Are there any specific resources out there that you can think of, again, for veterans that are looking to start a business? Are there any that come to mind that you've either personally used or just heard good things about?
So on the business side, it's tougher. I would find somebody that you really like, because there's so many influencers and so many people on like Instagram. There's a bunch of different places. There's a Explorer partnership. They do a bunch of investment stuff overseas, and they go on little trips and things like that. So they do investment stuff overseas, but it's a small group. Find a small group of like-minded people, or people that really like that avenue of kind of adventure. I'd call it any sort of adventure, because owning a business and trying to start a business, you need to be around 5 to 7 people that think like you all the time. So if your buddies are all just beer drinking guys that work at a factory and are ex-vets, that's probably not going to be okay for you. As far as real resources, Wounded Warrior Project is spectacular. For a ton of different things. They're kind of a one-stop shop. There's a bunch of VSOs, veteran service organizations, that help. There's not a ton of us veterans that own businesses. And getting into it, you're going to kind of have to do it alone. I think that's probably the best advice I can give you, because again, we all rely on other people, especially in the military, to point us in the right direction, and then we go get the job done. Figure out what it's like to be by yourself. Find something, go follow it for a little while, see what's up. If you don't like it, fail fast. Fail quickly, and then move on to the next thing. Yeah. Figure out if it's right for you.
Absolutely. That is obviously in recruiting. I have a lot of military members or vets reach out, and they transitioned out of service. They got into a skill bridge, maybe got picked up by that same company, or they kind of rushed into their next role, and then they're 6 months down the line, 1 year down the road, and they're like, I don't like this, right? But there's that internal kind of conflict of, well, I just, got into this role. There's that sense of loyalty that the military instills in all of us. So they don't necessarily want to walk away from it, but they know, okay, this isn't for me. This isn't where I want to stay. I appreciate you touching on that. So I got to ask two questions here. In your own transition out of the military, are there some things that you, now looking back, that you would have done differently?
That's only one question.
Well, and then, sorry. Yeah, it is. Let's pause it.
Pause. I'm waiting.
And then the second question is, what would you have done differently with your business? So,
got it.
Your choice. Which one do you want to take on?
The easy answer to both of those is no. I wouldn't change anything, because I probably wouldn't have ended up in this spot. I do my best not to regret decisions that I can't change now. I think where I'm at right now is my dad. I hate my dad sometimes for being right. And he says things work out the way they're supposed to. And I'm like, and when I was a kid, I was like, shut up. Just shut up. I don't like this. Because that means that you don't really necessarily have control, and you should probably appreciate where you're at, because you did make decisions. You did, maybe you messed up in the past, and that's okay. Don't do it in the future. Learn from those mistakes and go forward. Looking back, I don't know if my deployment was so spectacular that I made the decision to get out and go overseas, sight unseen, and just go. If it wasn't for that decision, I wouldn't be on this podcast. You can draw a dotted line for all sorts of different things that you go, well, what if, and then if you change those things and you are in your own mind, well, it's kind of a,
it's a butterfly effect, and you might end up with a different outcome.
Circles. It's like, what if I won the lottery? Like, okay, I can't do much about that because I didn't, or I did, and then I made those decisions and whatever. So, the best thing I can tell you with those things, especially with where I'm at now, I'm smarter and better than I used to be, and that's kind of my only metric.
Right.
I'm in better shape than I used to be. I'm in less pain than I used to be. And there was some super dark time. You talk about, the mental health side of things, especially when I got out, and there was you didn't go to mental health. You didn't go tell anybody about your pain, even physical pain. You go, shut up. Nobody. And the people that did were seen as shitbags. The people that didn't, and then they got 100% right out the gate, 100% disability. Mm-hmm. I'm going through that whole process now, the appeal process. Those people were playing the game, and they told you they were playing the game because their uncle told them how to do it or whatever. And I was like, you didn't even deploy. You didn't do anything. How are you even getting, you know what I mean? So there's this big divide in education of all that. And you compare yourself to those people who are now making $3,500 a month, or $4,000 a month for the rest of their lives. And you go, dang it, I should be more of a shitbag.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. But so, and you just said you are now going through that process.
Yeah.
Of what took you so long?
Yeah. That mindset of I would be, and this is something that's kind of ubiquitous amongst my age. That's a big word for me, by the way. A bunch of people that I know who I now am taking on kind of mentoring through this process, who all got out in the late 2000s and early 2010s, who are very similar to me, who A, don't trust the VA, B, don't think they're as broken as they are.
Right.
And they were told back in the day, you just don't say anything.
Right.
You don't go to the doctor. You don't, especially don't go to mental health. I'm very a lot more vulnerable than I used to be about all this stuff. But I've been in therapy for 2 years now, and that was a long, painful process to even get to that point of going, I think I'm a little more messed up than I think.
Yeah.
And that was other people telling me that. And if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be in the position I am right now of being able to help other people. Like one of my coaches, just went through he's in the he got out before me. He's a little older than me. Mm-hmm. He is going through the pre-process of building out his case for everything, because there's no medical history of anything either, but he was in Iraq. He was in the Army.
Right.
He just got diagnosed with some mental stuff that his wife had known for a very long time, but he wouldn't deal with it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he's automatically going to get 50, 70% PTSD. That changes your life.
Right.
That money and that help changes your life. And what you don't realize at the time is, I got some really good advice a long time ago when I first started this process 2.5 years ago, when I was initially figuring it out. You're not taking any money from anybody else.
There you go.
At all. He was saying some stat, and I can't remember exactly. I'll probably butcher it, but the VA, from a disability standpoint, has 20 some odd $1 billion in funding, and what's used every year is between 7 and 9. So just because you weren't blown up, just because you don't have outwardly, you're still functioning, because we're all taught to function.
Injuries that people can see. Yeah.
Correct. And even pain, just things that you wake up and you go, okay, well, those military boots really did a number on me, but that's not normal. And you realize that that's not normal when you are amongst the civilian population who has never sat there. And now I have no dorsal flexion in my feet. I have chronic Achilles tendonitis and plantar fasciitis and stuff, but you just deal with the pain.
Right.
And you're applying for your worst day, not your best day. If I can give any advice at all that really, really put it in perspective, what's your worst day like? That's what the military did. And that's what you should be applying for. And I doing all that, going through all this stuff and delaying for a really long time has now allowed me to help this other guy who's now going through the process. And I'm helping another coach who's going through the process and dragging his feet just like me. Right. And so anyway, so him getting the help that he needs, and now he's getting on medication, his moods are way better. It's a very different thing. That's spectacular. And that's kind of where I wanted to get to in a roundabout way today anyways, is talk about education from a transition standpoint. I think, and I don't know now, I just know what it was then.
Sure.
And I know what people are told active duty wise still to this day, especially when they have clearances or in the cleared community. You still don't say stuff because you're worried about ramifications. You still get the same paycheck, but what are your opportunities outside of that if you have the mark of mental health on you one way or another?
Right.
And I just want, the biggest thing for me is I wish that there was more education and less worry about a lot of that stuff. Because if you actually have issues and you get out and they're untreated, even if it's small or you think it's small, it could be something much larger. And we talked about suicide earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I've known, somebody died of liver disease the other day that I was in the military with, and he wasn't a hardcore alcoholic.
Sorry to hear that,
and it
man.
was directly related to that. I think it's 14 or 15 of cats that I was in the military with. And then on top of that, then there's all the other stories that you hear of somebody else. It's almost like cancer nowadays. It's like, oh yeah, I know somebody. Oh yeah, I know somebody. Oh, I know two people.
Right.
And to me, it's bullshit because I think there's still this big divide between transition correctly or transition efficiently. And I think when you go efficiently, that's the government sucks at being efficient, but I think they try to push people out who are or aren't ready. Mm-hmm. And don't give them potentially the opportunities or the VSOs that are out there, or the real opportunity to educate themselves on what it is and properly get out there and be a functioning member of society. Because I'll tell you one thing, the military does not do is teach you how to be a functioning member of society.
Yeah. And you touched on the saddest part for me is if you don't get help, what is the alternative, right? Folks are scared about having their, clearances revoked or being marked, with mental health problems or issues. What's the alternative? You're dead. That's the reality of the situation. Right. I hate saying it so bluntly that way, but like 14 or 15 real living people that you have watched leave this earth. I'm at 4. And 2 of those were particularly painful. One soldier I talked to every single day, and I had no idea what he was going through. None. For 5 years, So I think for, like you said, it's becoming more profound at this point, where we all know somebody that's been impacted by suicide. And it's just one of those things I keep going back to of like, how do we fix this at the smallest individual level? Well, you fix it by showing up and talking about it and saying, hey, it's okay. If you need help, it's all right. There are folks that can help you through this. Doesn't have to be your immediate friends, family members. There are professionals. You just got to navigate finding those resources and help. Thanks for touching on that, Lee. That's really, really powerful, and people need to hear that.
Well, the piggyback off of that, and it's one of those things where even I joke about it, but being a business owner is super lonely, and being out of the military with no community is super lonely. Whether it's a VFW or some other thing, the further away this is just personally, I ran, even as a military spouse, I ran away from absolutely everything military to try to fit in everywhere else I went, because the military and the government kept saying no. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to go do this thing. And then they kept saying no. So you end up on an island for a long time, or even a short amount of time is really, really rough. And finding a community, that's what, CrossFit, the CrossFit community, I'll say that, and CrossFit workouts were an avenue to get into that community, really made me feel sane. And like at least an hour out of the day, I didn't feel like I was completely crazy. And, it was something that bettered me, and I was in good shape, and I was like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Even around a bunch of other people that weren't in the military, and that's okay.
To close this out, what's the future with Lobo CrossFit Gym? Do you want to open more? Where are you taking this? Where's it going?
Yeah, great question. My perspective is constantly shifting on what it is that I want to do. I have I recently I have a girlfriend who's, I moved from Oregon. She's got 2 kids. I've never had any children. So that's my main focus right now.
Welcome to the dark side.
Yeah. So they're 13 and 15.
Nice.
And so the business side of it, which used to be my identity, has now shifted into, step parenting, different dynamic, super interesting. I really, really like it. It's really, really challenging. And what I'm learning is it's making me a better business owner. So as long as I can go day to day and just try to be better business owner, a better people person, better person for my coaches and my clients, then I'll take it. Really, as far as I've opened other gyms before, I had an Amazon business. I at one time I had 3 businesses at the same time. I don't really like juggling that many things because it takes me away from, now especially, it takes me away from the kids.
Right, your family.
And so finding a really, a really kind of roundabout way of saying I have no friggin' clue, is as long as I wake up and I'm excited about what's going on from dawn till dusk, I'm doing okay. And really, it's been a really cool opportunity to really reassess what priorities are, what's important in the world, where I put my energy, and if I can get my all my coaches I've just recently expanded my coaching staff to 14 from 11, and letting them take more of the reins has been difficult because I love to coach. I love the personality side of it. I love to help people.
Yeah.
And, but that's been a different challenge because now I'm helping 2 young people get ready for the world, and really focusing on the relationship side of everything, which my sordid past. But it's really, really interesting. So to answer your question, I have no friggin' clue. The sun is shining. My cat is purring. We're doing okay.
Nice. You have always been someone that I've thought is present. You were present back in 2009. You're present today. You are physically in your body here on this podcast. And I think CrossFit, it probably helps with that too, because you can't be off somewhere in your head when you're doing these big things in the gym. Where do people find you? How can someone connect with you after watching this? Are you on social media? Where can we find you?
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook is going to be CrossFit Lobo. My personal handle on Instagram is @LeeRingIsAPrick.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Oh no, the AV team, they're not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to block that. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah.
Your YouTube.
It's a foreign word. Don't worry what the translation is. But yeah, no, any of that stuff, if anybody ever wants to talk or talk about any of that stuff, I'm happy to chat, reach out. You're never going to waste my time. Unless you're in the Navy. I don't like Navy.
Oh, whoa. I knew you were going to take some shots on this podcast episode today. Well, Lee, thank you so much for joining MetroStar's Civvies Podcast today. As always, for our audience, we're making it our mission to make your military transition just a little bit better by sharing the stories of others like Lee that have gone before you. If you're watching today, jump in the comments, tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. We still appreciate you. And if you have anything to contribute, especially related to veterans and starting businesses, we want to hear from you. Thanks so much, Lee.
Thanks.